typically money is a consequence of clear purpose.
Understanding the end game. If you know what the end game is and you want to get there, once you hit those bumps in the road, you kind of go, well, I've got to get over this because my end game's over there.
Yeah.
There's only one way to get there, and it's through it.
It's the fun of entrepreneurialism, other challenges, and working out ways to get around them and through them. I came from a generation where you respected your family leaders and you almost didn't communicate your deep desires, and therefore there was a greater risk of misalignment. Families that are in business together, world over, have the same challenge in their own unique way. And I think dependent on the commercial aspects of running a business in a different country, we would argue that we're global experts at what we do and we can operate anywhere in the world.
A couple of tips. If you were giving advice to yourself, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago, what would you say? One or two things?
Let me think about that.
Private markets investments are investors can find some real value. I find the best way to learn is learn from someone who's done it before and given it a go. Hi, I'm Travis Miller, host of Grow Your Wealth podcast. Thanks for joining me here today. On these podcast sessions, we're going to talk through how certain investors have navigated the bumpy road of investing, whether it be through business or investments in general. Thanks for listening today. Welcome back to the Grow Your Wealth podcast, where we bring you insightful conversations with industry leaders to help you navigate the world of finance and investments. I'm your host, Travis Miller, and today we have a very special guest joining us, David Harland. Today we'll explore David's journey from working with his family business to finding his purpose as a mature age student and entering the global world of banking through the 1980s, early 1990s to become a global consultant, human and financial capital specialist today with a passion for helping families in business across Asia and the Pacific. We'll explore some of the key lessons he's learned along the way. So without further waiting any longer, let's dive into our conversation with David. Thanks for coming on, David.
Thank you, Travis. Great to be here.
How about we start at the beginning? Give us a summary of who you are and what you're currently focused on from a business perspective.
Sure. Oh, look, Travis, my family come from Roma, in fact, Western Queensland.
Wow.
And Dad was in the bank, and on my mother's side, they were the business. The business side of the family, and we came and I was born in Clovelly in Sydney here.
Nice spot.
Yeah, it was good. And but I didn't last too long here. We moved up to the family business back to Brisbane, and I grew up in that environment. And I suppose that's kind of led me to be passionate around family business. And today I run a consulting group that serves the Southern Hemisphere and families looking to deal with that question of transitions across generations. And apart from that, I look after, I wouldn't call it a family office, but my own family's capital and invest accordingly.
Gotcha. And what was the family business?
The family business was panel beating of all things. Well, it started off in the food industry, in baking. I had bakeries in Roma, Gayndah and Brisbane. Yeah. And then we got into the industry of repairing cars as they were brand new cars, in fact, as they came off the ships from Japan back in the early, I don't know, it must have been in the 70s, I suppose. And it was an interesting world, but obviously that industry changed a lot with the insurance companies getting involved and one would suspect that our family probably wasn't so good on the strategic positioning ready for that big change.
Did you learn anything? Any panel beating skills?
No.
I was on the tools?
I knew how to sweep a floor when I was 12 years old, that's for sure. Yeah.
Oh, got you. How about we go through, in Roma, born in Clovelly. What about your schooling? Where'd you go to high school, university?
Yeah. Well, I went to a high school called Kedron State High School.
Gotcha. I've heard of it,
just down the road from where we lived at Stafford Heights.
Yep.
In Brisbane. And I didn't go to university.
Gotcha.
In fact, when I left school, I was just saying to someone earlier that I left school when I was 17 years old, and the family said, we don't want you to come into the business. We want you to go out and work for the institutions for a while, which I thought, okay, well, that's fair enough.
Yep.
And I ended up at the National Bank in 1979 licking stamps in the mailroom. So
Gotcha.
That was an interesting start to a career. But I suppose I went through a process, and at 28 years old, I decided, well, I'm going to need to actually get a better education. And I went to university and I studied banking and finance and accounting.
Gotcha. Yeah, I saw the mature age student. So yes, you started licking stamps, and then you obviously had a bit of a banking career, right? So how did that go? What were you? What section were you in?
I really enjoyed the banking career. It was a lot of fun. But I think because my true passion was around family business, I just treated it like a young guy who wanted to explore the world and meet different people and have a good time, basically. But I worked in retail banking, corporate banking, and then institutional banking when Chase Manhattan came to Australia as Chase AMP Bank. Gotcha. So we got employed, and a group of us started out with the Chase Manhattan trained us for about a month here in Sydney. We lived in some apartments in Bridge Street.
Yeah, and nice spot to live.
Yeah. So we had this intensive training, and we started the branch up in Brisbane in that old, well, not old, but it's a nice blue tower there, which is called the AMP Tower there on the river.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's great. And so what would a day, I'm sure no day's the same, right? But if you look at a week, what would you get up to as far as, say, helping out a family in your day-to-day job?
Yeah, well, maybe the most recent, days is probably a good example. Having a family committee meeting, having to facilitate that on what day is today? Today's Thursday, so maybe Tuesday night, and dealing with some really big challenges that the family has where the board was wanting to make some changes and the family unit were probably a bit of tension around this. So working that through, and then only last night spending a couple of hours with the consultant and the family and just trying to get the family aligned about understanding the same information and actually making a decision based on alignment of the same information.
Gotcha. So you're sort of nearly acting as a chair mediator across the family so that you get to an outcome that sort of suits everyone, I guess. Would that be one example? Or
It's a really good point. And I think one of the things when you come from advisory industries like banking it's a big challenge to make a transition to the people side of the business because you've got to change that. You've got to stop giving advice and do a lot more listening and facilitation. And I think facilitation is a combination of consulting where you know where you're trying to move the family to, but you're getting them to do that themselves.
Gotcha.
So I find it it was a big challenge for me actually is to stop giving advice and listen and help people get there themselves.
Hey, if you're enjoying this, please subscribe on whatever platform you're using. It helps us build a community. We want to educate investors, and this is what it's all about. And how did you, obviously moved to the entrepreneurial world, how did you jump from the banking world, presumably a secure, safe, enjoyable career path, to say, I want to go out and maybe follow the passion about working with family businesses?
Well, our family was led by my uncle, who only passed away last year at 99. And we had cattle properties and the business and investment portfolio. And so I convinced him that he needed to set up a single family office. So I ran that for quite a few years.
Yeah.
And that was just sort of the beginning step, I think, of following this passion of why do some families successful across generations and why are some not? And so whilst I came from the financial world in the last 15 to 20 years, I've moved into the people world where understanding the emotions and the passions that drive the families that drive the management decisions of wealth.
Gotcha. So you're in a perfect position, right? So you've run a single family office, come from a family business, and then you're working with like-minded people, I guess, to help them move forward as a family.
Exactly. And I think the big step for me was a mentor I had, which was a lady by the name of Dr. Freda Hers-Brown out of New York. And it was when I decided that there is a professional body in the world that actually helps build capability for people like myself, facilitators in this space. And she's been a great mentor for me and a great mentor for our business to build the methodologies that we use. And she's still on my board today. She's a founder of the industry in the United States, and she's now been a director with us for over 10 years.
Pretty handy.
Yeah, it's been good. Yeah.
Now, I think you might have already answered my next question because you've mentioned your uncle
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
But I'm going to ask, so a number of people that have influenced you and why?
Yeah. It's a really interesting question because I've thought long and hard about this over the years because people have influenced me like my uncle and his leadership, his work ethic, his ability to be irreverent about social class and actually see people for who they are and get them to work in a common aligned direction.
Yeah.
But by the same token, there's putting all your eggs in one basket and one sort of leadership style can have its dangers. And I think that was something that impacted me because I believe his leadership style precluded our family from transitioning to a cousins consortium because he was so tight and so controlling, which led to his success. But I actually think it led to his failure and our family's failure.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So he's more of a control, wants to control the path that family went down.
Yeah, well, I think it's more complicated though, but generally, that's generally a good way to put it, I think.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And anyone else influenced you?
Well, I think this lady, apart from mum and dad, like all of us, and they had their interesting ways of influencing us.
Yeah.
But obviously, when we talk about leadership and how that's influenced you in business, it's usually people outside the family as well.
Yeah.
And my uncle was one, but I think the lady, Dr. Freda Hurst Brown, who was a really tough lady who mentored me, but she never gave me too much space to waffle or go down any pathway without questioning me hard, and which made me question myself and make good decisions as a result.
Gotcha. And what was there? Is there any for the listeners? Was it more her style, or there's one or two things she said to you that were sort of important quotes or traits that you thought were valuable as far as a learning?
Let me think about that. I think it was more her style.
Her style, yeah.
I think a lot
type.
of people would be offended by her if they were to first be confronted by her questioning. But it actually helps you peel the layers away a bit and the ego and helps you really understand yourself.
Gotcha. So it's more just direct to the point, and you've got to answer the question.
Very direct to the point, but with a well put questions, or she puts things in a way that were data driven rather than emotionally driven. Yeah.
Gotcha. Sounds good. How about some pivotal moments? One day you got up and said, gee, that changed things.
Well, look, I think, when I realised that family business was the place that I wanted to, that was where my passion was, and felt that I wanted to be involved with the family and their business. Yeah. But realising, I think, as our uncles and aunties grew older and the cousins were coming through, there was a lot of competitive tention going on around.
It's complex, isn't it?
Very complex.
How many people would that be, you think? Like, you're talking 15, 20 people here?
With uncles and aunties, and there was probably about 25.
Wow.
Yeah,
I got you.
So I think the pivotal moment was realising, hey, my expectation of being involved with this family in this business is different to the ones who are making the decisions expectations.
Gotcha.
And I had this aha moment thinking, hang on, why is this? Well, I've got to this age, which was getting in my later 20s, and thinking, I've hitched my horse to something that doesn't really exist. And so I just made it my job to understand in the broader market what goes on in families. That what I said earlier. Why do some fail and why do some succeed in terms of transitioning to the next generation?
Because you hear it so much these days, succession planning.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's an aspect of what you get up to, but not only.
Yeah, I always explain it like this, Travis.
Yeah.
If you think of a wedge, most people in the professional markets come from a transactional background.
Yeah.
And so the thin edge of the wedge is that pointy end where you've got to write documents and think about when someone's no longer on this planet with us.
Gotcha.
But the real transition and succession happens at the thick edge of the wedge, which is around how do you educate and communicate as a family to build leadership in the next generation to have the capacity to take over, whether you're alive or no longer here. Yeah.
Someone to make the decisions when you're not there, effectively. Make good decisions.
Yeah, and have some experience at that before a crisis event.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
As far as business goes, what motivates you? Like, what makes you get up in the morning and say, I'm on?
Look, I suspect that I haven't thought too deeply about that, but I suspect that the real one is when I work with my own family and in terms of our family office, and I see things like two young sons always sort of pushing back at dad a bit because he's sort of so hell bent on this stuff, and which is understandable. I get their perspective, and they've got no real interest in what my interests are. But they now 27 and 25, we set up a little investment committee, and it's functioning really well, and they're showing great interest. So seeing happy, healthy family, your own, and they're not easy families, they're never easy. So seeing that working well, but working well and linking the next generation into the decision making of investment decisions is one. And then on the client side, working with other families, there's the same. To know that you've worked with a family for 3 to 5 years, and you sit back one day and you go, and they go, wow, look at us. We started as a bit of a rabble. We couldn't even make a decision together, or we couldn't even sit together. To hey, we're functioning at a very high level here, and we're separating out as best we can the emotion from the actual need to make good decisions together.
That's really good. Yeah, I know for your kids as well, that's the right age. Like, they've got past the sort of I'm having fun, 27, 28, and they're old enough to make those decisions. It's a nice little stepping stone.
Yeah. No, that's right. I suppose that fun thing's is a relative statement, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
I think
kid fun.
That we hope we always are having fun, and they start to, I think, move into that being hey, we've got to be responsible and accountable here for our own future.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this episode. If you want to learn more about alternative assets, there's a book here you can read, How You Grow Your Wealth with Alternative Assets. Now back to the episode. Now, taking a step back to the working for large institutions, what advice would you give to someone looking to move from a large institution out to running their own business, setting up a new sort of entrepreneurial sort of pursuit? Yeah. What would you say? Because you've ultimately done it yourself. Whether you planned it or fell into it, you've definitely done it.
Well, I think you've got to be clear about your purpose.
Yeah.
We know that life's tough as it is when you're working in an institution with all of that resources and support network you have around you. Although it can be a bit of a jungle working in an institution, I get that. But if you're not clear about your purpose, then when you come up against challenges, you're probably not going to get through them well.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. So if you're really clear about it and determined in a well-researched way, I mean, we can't just be determined about something that's not achievable.
Yeah.
I think it's that clear about purpose, be resilient.
Yep.
But I think being clear about purpose teaches you resilience.
Gotcha.
Because you navigate the challenges to get to where you want to go.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs leaving institutions or believe they're entrepreneurs don't have an ounce of entrepreneurial ism in them.
Right, yeah.
They just think, well, hey, look at Joe out there making all that money. But typically money is a consequence of clear purpose.
Yeah. For sure. Makes sense. So just understanding the end game effectively.
Yeah.
And your point on resilience is very critical, right?
Yeah.
If you know what the end game is and you want to get there, once you hit those bumps in the road, you kind of go, well, I've got to get over this because my end game's over there. Yeah. There's only one way to get there, and it's through it.
It's probably a bit of if I make this statement, I don't mean it as simple as this, but it's the fun of entrepreneurialism, are the challenges, and working out ways to get around them and through them.
Yeah, it's good. Now, bumps in the road was my next question, so that's why I threw that one in there. But what hasn't worked across time? A couple of things.
Lots of things. We talk about family business. I got involved in a business with my brother.
Yep.
Love him dearly, and we have a great relationship, or a reasonable relationship now. But at the time, it failed. basically, and on a number of accounts. But when I peel back the reasons and rationalise it to myself, it's going into business.
Yeah.
First of all, not clear about your purpose.
Yeah.
But secondly, and probably importantly, if you're going into business with others, whether it's family or not family, is are you both aligned?
Yeah.
Not only in the here and now, but how you get out of it and where you want to take it.
Yeah.
You know? And I think when I look at my brother and I, we were misaligned. We never talked about those things.
Yeah.
But we were probably young and learning ourselves. Yeah.
I think that's so spot on because having gone into business myself, it's so critical with your founders and your other shareholders.
Yeah.
What's their time frame? What's their ambition? So what do they want to build? And if that's wrong, it's very, very difficult to back out and sort of replan the whole show. Yeah, so it's getting it right at time zero is a critical learning.
Yeah. And there's a lot of emotion caught up in business because most people, I think, if it was like me that want to go into business like that, it's driven hopefully by research and data, but underlying that's a really strong desire, emotion to do this sort of thing. And when it comes undone, well, all of those challenges, emotional challenges, come to the surface. Yeah,
it's all blue sky at the start.
Yeah.
Now, a couple of tips. If you were giving advice to yourself, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago, what would you say? One or two things?
Education.
Yep. So you would have started earlier. Is that your view?
Would have started earlier.
Yeah.
I was the first person in my family to go to university.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So I didn't come from a family background that was placed a lot of value on education. They placed a lot of value on hard work and getting on with the job.
Yeah.
So I would definitely say education, and it never stops.
Yeah. You know, said education, the easiest path is to do well in high school, do well at university, and get a grad job at some large institution. That path is very predictable and easy. If you don't follow that path, it is still lots of ways to go to be successful. It just takes longer, it's more complex, and it's different.
Yeah.
And you learn a lot on the journey, but it is the easiest way is do well at school.
Yeah.
And then you sort of you move through that natural path. But it's not for everyone though. No. It wasn't for me. But I know when I speak to my kids, it's like do well at high school, do well at uni. Yeah. And then you're off and running with your career.
Yeah, that's true.
So education's critical.
Education, and I think the other critical one, which is all a big part of our world, is I came from a generation where you respected your leaders, you respected your family leaders, and you almost didn't communicate your deep desires, and therefore there was a greater risk of misalignment. Yeah, because the older generation have views, and if you have views and you don't actually talk about them and get alignment on those views, your risks of coming unstuck are greater. Yeah, they always say, if you're going to fail, you want to fail quickly. Yeah, so talk about them. Yeah, and get on with them, whether it's together or separately.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
What's success for you? What does it look like?
Success could be in some ways scary because I've always in my life been purposeful about non-financial things, albeit I do want to enjoy the success that money brings, but not for money's sake only.
Gotcha.
And so I think I've always set big goals, and I've got some big goals for our business at the moment. Yeah. And I wonder sometimes, I ask myself the question, gee, what happens when I achieve that goal? Yeah. Because I have fun working towards those big goals. Yeah. Gotcha. But success to me is really a happy, harmonious family, hoping to see that expand into the next generation with my two sons and their relationships and their families that they choose to build, and growing the wealth around all of that sufficient to make their lives better than my life. I think that's
pretty good.
Pretty
it's great.
Yeah.
On the big goals, you expanded into Asia. How did you take that step from? Was it just there was families you're working with here that had cross border, or you just made that leap?
Yeah,
to a different region.
that is the answer, I think, in the simplest sense. But families that we work with are very private and confidential.
Yep.
So we've been running in the business now for 20-odd years in doing what we're doing, and you wouldn't survive if family A knew that you'd spoken to family B, that you're even working for them.
Yeah, gotcha.
Now, we know that's a big issue in the transactional industries is that we all say, we all get highly pumped about, I'm working for XY family.
Yeah.
And you go and tell everybody. Well, we actually train our consultants that you just cannot do that. And I think families respect us, and therefore most of our work comes from one family referring us to another family. Gotcha. So Asia was simply this. We got a first job in Singapore with an Indian, significant Indian family.
Gotcha.
And then we actually got work in India because that family's referred us to another family in India.
Gotcha.
And so that just keeps growing. It's an organic growth. But the big goal, linking back to your question immediately before this, is to really build the brand name out now, and be very careful with the consultants and grow the consultants with a really clear purpose and some really interesting. We call it the primary levain, which is the thing that you use in a sourdough bread.
Gotcha.
So we've got that really well set out, and so our consultants must meet some tight parameters before we'd even take them on, which is the tough bit.
Gotcha.
And so good resources, working with families that are growing, having a growing need for wanting to deal with this. In Singapore, family offices now are growing significantly. But they're growing significantly in the sense that of the financial and legal sense. Yeah. But they're all struggling to know how to transition and how to bring the family along with that journey.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of those families are coming from the region like from Malaysia, Indonesia, and sort of basing themselves there in Singapore
and China.
True. Yeah, that's the bigger one. Yeah. And China. So on resourcing, so you go to India. Is it the same? Is it a similar skill set, or in different sort of regions do you need to hire new people, or you kind of just it's the same philosophy, the same process, and just helping the family sort of transition and have a succession in place? Yeah. Or do you need to hire into the regions?
The answer is you do need to hire into the regions.
Yep.
But there's probably a few parts to this because families, because they're private and confidential, sometimes actually like to work with someone that's not from the region too.
For sure.
So
true.
So that people ask me this question a lot. They say, well, David, how do you deal with Indian families and the significant cultural differences between what you're used to? And I think you've got to be very sensitive to the cultural differences, and we've learned a lot over the years. Yeah. But the most important thing is that families that are in business together world over have the same challenges.
Gotcha.
But in their own unique way.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Yeah, and similar problems.
And I think, dependent on the commercial aspects of running a business in a different country, that's the way we approach it. We would argue that we're global experts at what we do, and we can operate anywhere in the world.
Gotcha.
But we've really got to be sensitive to the cultural differences. If you are, they play a minority role in your work that you do with the family.
Gotcha.
A lot of families now in India, for example, or Singapore or anywhere in the world, you look at the next generation, grandma and granddad probably can't even speak English, but the children have been to Harvard, they've been skilled in the US, and they're coming back, and that's where some of these tensions sort of start flowing through.
Yeah. Gotcha. Kids are more educated.
And have a global perspective. Speak English.
They maybe don't have the same sort of street smarts kind of, the sort of the ethic, hard work ethic of coming through.
Exactly.
Building a business. Hey, if you're enjoying this, please leave a review. It's really important to us. We're trying to build momentum around education, and better reviews will get more people coming and listening. Yeah, exactly. Okay, a couple of quick answer questions.
Okay, go.
You're going to have quite a few here probably, given your background. What was your first job?
Sweeping the floors in the panel beating shop.
Gotcha. Yeah. Touched on this a little bit earlier, but piece of advice for your younger self.
Choose leaders or mentors in life. Many.
Yeah, I got you.
don't. I think I use the term hitch your horse.
Yeah.
To one style or one, no matter how good it is.
Yeah, it's pretty pertinent. Is that mentors are huge these days. The young kids, everyone wants multiple mentors. Wasn't necessarily a thing, sort of, maybe when we were sort of going through school and starting our careers. But it's interesting you say that because it is critical.
Yeah,
and a lot of people sort of in our generation don't think about it.
Yeah, and that probably comes back to that issue that I probably placed too much emphasis on that one uncle who was a great leader. As I said earlier, but still, that was probably something I'd like to do differently for my younger self.
Good on you. Motivates you most as a person?
I think successful relationships.
Yep.
Yeah, good, healthy relationships in every aspect of life. I mean, I had lunch with somebody yesterday who's a fund manager, and we have lunch. We had no reason to catch up for lunch. We just have a good time, and we invest some family money with this fund manager. And he said, well, let's just go and have lunch,
That's good.
And I think, we all work and we only have limited time on this planet. So if you're not waking up and enjoying what you're doing and the relationships that are around you, then you got to change it.
Sure. Critical to get the balance right.
Yeah.
Tips for driving long-term wealth?
This might be a bit narrow, but as you can imagine, my answer here will be understand why you're driving wealth.
Yep.
And make sure that why is aligned in the people who own that wealth.
Yeah, it's good. Makes sense. Biggest mistake people make in trying to create wealth?
Thinking you can pick the market.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. Thinking you're smarter than everyone else.
Yeah. Take it slow and steady.
Yeah.
When you're not working, obviously you're out to lunch yesterday with your fund manager, mate, but when you're not working, how do you spend your time?
Oh, look, I thought about this a lot, not because of this interview, but just how do you spend your time? Like I bike ride. I love my mountain bike riding. I was in London recently and I got a gravel bike. I've never ridden a gravel bike before.
Is that the big tyres, are they?
Big tyre, yeah. It's like a road bike, but it's a cross between a road and a mountain bike. And we went down to Tunbridge Wells and rode about 6 hours. I loved it. Yeah, so bike riding. My wife and I love travelling, swimming, just exploring and spending time together. So, And
I don't know if you remember last time we bumped into each other. It was in Queensland and you come in Brisbane and you came flying in on a scooter you'd hired. Oh, that's right. I thought it was pretty impressive. Who's this bloke here? And Alex at work said,
where were we?
This is David. This is it was his CBD Brizzy. I was just on a road show meeting some clients.
Yes.
And you were obviously in town and you had your little scooter on the bike line.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting
Very
thing.
impressive.
My wife and I, we had our office in the city.
Yeah.
This is I'd say must be 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And my wife would say to me, when are you going to get home from the office? And I said, I'll be home in 5 minutes. She says, you're kidding yourself. It takes you half an hour to drive from the city. And we live, as the crow flies, 2 minutes away at South Bank on the other side of the river.
Yeah.
And so we both clicked and said, if we had a little scooter, and this is before scooters were big. I mean, no one had them.
Yeah.
So we rang up and we found these two scooters, and we actually, you felt like a bit of a fool, really.
Yeah.
Riding a scooter through the over the river at South Bank, through the gardens, but we did it.
It's a short trip when you think about it like that, don't you? Just around the bend, and you're actually there.
10 minutes.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So that's the scooter story. Josh, that's where it started. But look at the scooters now. I mean, they're a bit of a problem, really, in Brisbane and everywhere, I think.
Yeah. Let's say it doesn't seem as busy. Sydney's quite steep, it's quite hilly.
Yes.
I don't, it's just not as busy as Melbourne and Brizzy on the travels, but still a smart idea.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Trav. It's been my pleasure. Yeah.
Everyone who's listening in, if you're interested in connecting with David, you can connect with him on LinkedIn. We'll include the link in the show notes. I really appreciate the chat and coming on the show.
Yeah, good, Travis. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a great opportunity. Yeah, thanks.
Hey, if you're enjoying this, please leave a review. It's really important to us. We're trying to build momentum around education, and better reviews will get more people coming and listening.